What if the biggest thing standing between you and the life you want isn't your lack of talent, money, or opportunity, but the identity you've been carrying for years? Most people spend their lives trying to change their habits. They chase better routines, read more books, set bigger goals, and hope that one day everything will finally click. But habits don't create lasting transformation on their own. They simply reveal who you believe you already are. If deep down you still see yourself as someone who isn't capable, isn't worthy, or isn't ready, your actions will always find a way back to that story. The most powerful change you can ever make isn't what you do. It's who you decide to become. Every great leader, every extraordinary creator, every person who leaves a meaningful impact on the world reaches a moment where they stop asking, "What should I achieve?" and start asking, "Who do I need to be?" Because purpose isn't discovered by accident. It's built through the daily decision to align your identity with your values instead of your fears. The truth is, you were never born to imitate someone else's definition of success. You were born with the ability to grow, to serve, to lead, and to create a life that reflects your deepest purpose. But becoming that person requires letting go of an identity that no longer serves you. And that's uncomfortable because the brain always prefers what's familiar over what's possible. Today isn't about changing your personality. It's about changing the story you tell yourself every single day. Because the moment your identity changes, your decisions change, your standards change, your relationships change, and eventually your entire life begins to follow. Most people believe that if they could just set the right goals, everything in their life would change. They think the breakthrough is hidden in a better plan, a stronger strategy, or a new source of motivation. So they write goals on paper. They create vision boards. They promise themselves that this year will be different. And for a little while it is. They wake up earlier, they work harder, they feel inspired. But then, slowly, almost invisibly, they drift back toward the same patterns they were trying to escape. Why does that happen? Because goals live on the surface, but identity lives underneath everything. Imagine a person who says, "I want to become healthy." That is a goal. But if that person still sees themselves as someone who lacks discipline, someone who always quits, someone who has never been athletic, then every healthy action feels temporary. Going to the gym feels like pretending. Eating well feels like a short-term project. The moment life becomes difficult, the old identity pulls them back. Not because they are weak, but because human beings naturally act in ways that are consistent with who they believe they are. Identity is the story you repeat to yourself so often that it begins to feel like truth. And the dangerous thing is that many of us inherited that story long before we were old enough to question it. Maybe someone told you that you were not smart enough. Maybe you failed at something important and decided that failure defined you. Maybe you spent years trying to fit into environments that made you feel small. Over time, those experiences became labels, and those labels became identity. I'm not a leader. I'm not confident. I'm not creative. I'm just an average person. The problem is not that these statements are true. The problem is that once you accept them as part of your identity, your brain begins collecting evidence to support them. You notice every mistake and ignore every sign of progress. You interpret challenges as proof that you should stop. You protect the identity, even when it is hurting you. This is why changing your life requires more than changing your behavior. Think about the people who create extraordinary change in the world. They do not start by asking, "What goal should I achieve?" They start by becoming the kind of person who naturally moves toward that goal. A leader does not lead because leadership is on a checklist. A leader leads because serving others becomes part of who they are. A creator creates because curiosity becomes part of their identity. A courageous person is not someone who never feels fear. It is someone who no longer sees fear as a reason to abandon who they are becoming. When your identity changes, your actions stop feeling forced. Consider the difference between someone trying to write a book and someone who sees themselves as a writer. The first person waits for inspiration. The second person writes because that is what writers do. The same task exists in both cases, but the relationship to the task is completely different. One is chasing a goal. The other is expressing an identity. That distinction changes everything. We often underestimate how much energy is consumed by acting against our own self-image. If you believe you are disorganized, every attempt to become organized feels exhausting. If you believe you are shy, every conversation feels like a performance. If you believe success belongs to other people, every opportunity feels suspicious. The mind constantly tries to maintain consistency between belief and behavior. So the real question is not, what do I want? The real question is, who do I believe I am? Because whether you realize it or not, your life is already organized around the answer. Your friendships, your habits, your standards, your excuses, your ambitions, All of them are connected to identity. And that is actually good news, because it means transformation is possible. Identities are not fixed, they are built. They are reinforced through repeated choices. Every time you act in alignment with the person you want to become, you cast a vote for a new identity. One workout does not make you healthy, but it is evidence that a healthy identity is emerging. One difficult conversation does not make you confident, but it is evidence that a confident identity is growing. One act of integrity does not make you a leader, but it is evidence that leadership is becoming part of who you are. This is why small actions matter so much. They are not important because of the immediate result. They are important because they send a message to your brain about who you are becoming. The tragedy is that many people spend years fighting their behavior without ever challenging the identity beneath it. They try to change outcomes while protecting the very beliefs that created those outcomes. But once you begin to see yourself differently, your decisions begin to change. And once your decisions begin to change, your future starts changing with them. The beliefs you hold about yourself are rarely facts. They are stories. Stories shaped by childhood experiences, moments of success and failure, the opinions of other people, and the meaning you chose to give those moments. Over time, those stories become so familiar that you stop questioning them. You simply accept them as reality. And without realizing it, you begin making decisions that protect those beliefs instead of challenging them. This is one of the most fascinating parts of human behavior. We don't always choose what is best for us. More often, we choose what feels familiar, even if that familiarity keeps us stuck. Think about someone who has spent years believing they are not capable of leading others. They might have the intelligence, the character, and the vision to inspire a team. Yet every opportunity to step forward feels uncomfortable. They stay quiet in meetings. They hesitate before sharing an idea. They allow others to make decisions they know they could make better. It isn't because they lack ability. It is because their identity has convinced them that leadership belongs to someone else. The same pattern appears in every area of life. A person who believes they are always unlucky notices every setback, but overlooks every opportunity. A person who believes they are unworthy of success becomes uncomfortable the moment success begins to appear. A person who believes they always disappoint others eventually creates the very outcomes they fear. The mind has an incredible need for consistency. It constantly tries to make your actions match your beliefs. That means if your beliefs are small, your life will slowly become small enough to fit them. The challenge, then, is not simply to think positively. Positive thinking alone is fragile. Anyone can feel positive on a good day. Anyone can believe in themselves when everything is working. The real transformation begins when you replace limiting beliefs with beliefs that are rooted in purpose rather than emotion. Purpose is remarkably powerful because it shifts the conversation away from your fears and toward your contribution. Instead of asking, "Am I good enough?" you begin asking, "How can I serve?" Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" you begin asking, "What if someone needs what only I can offer?" Instead of asking, "What will people think?" you begin asking, "What kind of example do I want to set?" Notice how different those questions feel. Fear focuses inward. Purpose looks outward. Fear protects comfort. Purpose creates courage. Fear asks you to survive. Purpose invites you to grow. This is why the greatest leaders are not driven by ego. They are driven by a cause greater than themselves. They understand that leadership is not about being the smartest person in the room. It is about creating an environment where people feel safe enough to become the best version of themselves. And that begins with becoming the best version of yourself first. But becoming that person requires replacing beliefs that no longer serve you. Many people wait for confidence before taking action. They believe confidence arrives first and action follows. Human behavior teaches us the opposite. Confidence grows because of repeated action. Every courageous decision becomes evidence that challenges an old belief. The first time you speak up, your voice may shake. The first time you start a business, you may doubt every decision. The first time you stand up for your values, you may feel alone. Those moments do not prove you are incapable. They prove you are expanding beyond an identity that no longer fits. Growth always feels unfamiliar because your old beliefs are fighting to stay alive. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with rocks your entire life. After years of carrying that weight, it starts feeling normal. You forget what it feels like to move freely. Then one day, someone removes the backpack. At first, the lightness feels strange. Your body almost misses the weight because it became part of your identity. Limiting beliefs work the same way. They become emotional habits. You expect disappointment because disappointment feels familiar. You expect rejection because rejection has become predictable. You expect failure because failure has become part of your personal story. But what if those expectations were never your destiny? What if they were simply habits of thought, repeated long enough to feel permanent? The remarkable thing about the human mind is that it learns through repetition. Every day you reinforce either your limitations or your possibilities. When you consistently choose responsibility over excuses, your identity changes. When you consistently choose learning over proving yourself, your identity changes. When you consistently choose courage over comfort, your identity changes. When you consistently choose integrity over convenience, your identity changes. These are not dramatic moments that make headlines. They are quiet decisions made when nobody is watching. They are the conversations you choose to have, the promises you keep to yourself, the standards you refuse to lower. These moments shape character, and character shapes identity. Purpose also gives your belief stability during difficult seasons. If your identity depends on achievement, failure will destroy your confidence. If your identity depends on approval, criticism will control your emotions. If your identity depends on comfort, uncertainty will paralyze your progress. But if your identity is rooted in purpose, setbacks become teachers rather than verdicts. You stop measuring yourself by temporary outcomes and begin measuring yourself by the values you refuse to compromise. That is why purpose is stronger than motivation. Motivation rises and falls. Purpose remains. Purpose reminds you why the work matters when the excitement disappears. Purpose reminds you who you are when circumstances try to convince you otherwise. And once your identity becomes rooted in growth, responsibility, service, and integrity, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop chasing validation because your actions are no longer driven by the need to prove your worth. They are driven by the desire to live in alignment with the person you have chosen to become. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to reinforce that identity. Every obstacle becomes a chance to strengthen it, and every decision becomes another vote for the life you are always capable of creating. One of the greatest misconceptions about personal growth is the belief that life changes in dramatic moments. We love stories about overnight success because they are exciting. We admire the breakthrough, the promotion, the transformation, the moment someone finally reaches the top. But what we rarely see are the thousands of ordinary decisions that made that moment possible. Human beings are naturally drawn to big results, yet our lives are almost always shaped by small, repeated actions. The person you become is not determined by what you do once. It is determined by what you do consistently. That sounds simple, but it is incredibly difficult because consistency is not exciting. There is no audience applauding when you wake up early to keep a promise to yourself. No one celebrates the days you choose discipline over distraction or patience over instant gratification. Most of the work that shapes your future happens quietly, away from recognition, in moments that seem too small to matter. And yet those moments matter the most. Imagine trying to build a house by laying one brick every day. Looking at a single brick, it feels insignificant. You might even question whether it is making any difference. But after months of laying one brick after another with care and intention, a foundation appears. Walls begin to rise. Rooms begin to take shape. Eventually, people admire the house without ever realizing it was built through ordinary actions repeated consistently. Character is built the same way. Identity is built the same way. Every habit is another brick. This is why the habits you choose should never be separated from the person you want to become. Too often, people focus on outcomes instead of identity. They ask, what habit will make me successful? A more powerful question is, what habit would someone with my desired identity naturally practice every day? If you want to become a leader, leadership is not something you turn on when the opportunity arrives. Leadership begins in the smallest interactions. It begins with listening before speaking. It begins with showing respect when respect is difficult. It begins with keeping your word even when breaking it would be easier. Those actions may seem unrelated to leadership, but they are exactly what leadership looks like before anyone gives you the title. Titles don't create leaders. Habits create leaders. The same is true in every area of life. A healthy person doesn't become healthy because of one perfect meal. They become healthy because nourishing their body becomes part of who they are. A trustworthy person isn't trusted because of one honest conversation. They are trusted because honesty becomes their standard in every conversation. A courageous person isn't courageous because they never experience fear. They become courageous because choosing action despite fear becomes a habit. The beauty of habits is that they reduce the distance between intention and action. Think about how much energy is wasted negotiating with yourself every day. I'll start tomorrow. I'll do it when I feel ready. I'll wait until life becomes less busy. Those conversations slowly drain your confidence because every broken promise becomes evidence against the identity you are trying to build. But habits remove unnecessary decisions. You don't debate whether you brush your teeth every morning. You simply do it because it has become part of your life. Imagine if showing kindness became that automatic. Imagine if reading every day became that automatic. Imagine if exercising, learning, preparing, serving, and leading became that natural. When habits become part of your identity, discipline begins to feel less like sacrifice and more like self-respect. That changes everything. Many people think discipline means forcing yourself to do things you hate. But lasting discipline comes from alignment. When your habits reflect your values, they stop feeling like punishment. If you genuinely see yourself as someone who values growth, learning becomes enjoyable. If you genuinely see yourself as someone who serves others, helping people becomes natural. If you genuinely see yourself as someone who leads with integrity, making the difficult decision becomes easier because it protects your identity. This is why lasting change cannot rely on motivation. Motivation is emotional. Habits are structural. Motivation disappears when life becomes stressful. Habits remain because they have become part of your daily rhythm, and life will become stressful. There will be mornings when you don't feel inspired. There will be seasons when progress seems invisible. There will be moments when your efforts appear meaningless. Those are the moments that reveal whether your actions are connected to temporary excitement or permanent identity. One of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is lowering the importance of perfection and increasing the importance of consistency. Perfection creates pressure. Consistency creates progress. When people miss one workout, they often quit entirely because they believe they have failed. When they skip one day of studying, they convince themselves they are not disciplined. When they make one mistake, they assume they have become that mistake. But identity isn't destroyed by one imperfect day. Identity is strengthened by returning the next day. The person you are becoming is not measured by whether you stumble. It is measured by how quickly you return to the path. Growth has never been about never falling. Growth has always been about refusing to stay down. Every day presents a simple opportunity, one decision, one promise, one action. That action may seem insignificant, but it is never isolated. Every habit leaves behind evidence. Your mind quietly observes everything you repeatedly do. It asks, what kind of person behaves this way? And then it begins updating your identity based on the answer. That is why every small choice carries extraordinary power. Reading 10 pages today may not change your life today, but it reinforces the identity of someone committed to learning. Choosing honesty during an uncomfortable conversation may not immediately solve every problem, but it strengthens the identity of someone who values integrity over convenience. Showing up when nobody expects you to may not earn immediate recognition, but it reinforces the identity of someone who can be trusted. Over time, these moments compound, not because they are dramatic, because they are repeated. The world often celebrates the visible achievement while overlooking the invisible habits that created it. But every meaningful life is built from those invisible moments. Every respected leader, every inspiring teacher, every compassionate parent, every trusted friend, every person who creates lasting impact reaches that point through ordinary choices, repeated long enough to become extraordinary character. And once your daily habits stop being something you force yourself to do and become a reflection of who you believe you are, you no longer wake up asking whether you feel motivated. You wake up knowing that today's actions are simply another expression of the person you have chosen to become. Before you can lead a team, a company, a community, or a movement, you have to learn to lead yourself. That may sound obvious, yet it is one of the most overlooked truths in personal growth. We often imagine leadership as something that begins when other people choose to follow us. But real leadership starts long before anyone is watching. It begins in the private moments when you decide whether your actions will be guided by your values or by your fears. Every single day, every person faces this choice. Fear is incredibly persuasive. It tells you to stay quiet because speaking up might make someone uncomfortable. It tells you to delay your dreams because failure would be embarrassing. It tells you to avoid difficult conversations because conflict feels painful. Fear always promises safety, but what it usually delivers is regret. Values ask something different of you. Values ask you to tell the truth even when the truth is difficult. They ask you to take responsibility even when excuses would be easier. They ask you to remain kind even when others are not. They ask you to stand for what is right even when standing alone feels uncomfortable. The difference between fear and values is not simply emotional, it is directional. Fear points you toward comfort. Values point you toward purpose. This is why leadership is never about having all the answers. Leadership is about consistently choosing purpose over comfort, especially when those choices are difficult. Think about the leaders who have had the greatest impact on your life. Chances are you don't remember them because they were perfect. You remember them because they were consistent. They made you feel seen. They kept their promises. They acted with integrity. Their words matched their actions. That consistency created trust. And trust is the foundation of every meaningful relationship. Without trust, people may obey you. With trust, people choose to believe in you. The same principle applies to the relationship you have with yourself. Every promise you make to yourself either builds trust or weakens it. When you say you will wake up early and you do it, trust grows. When you commit to learning something new and you follow through, trust grows. When you decide to face a difficult challenge instead of avoiding it, trust grows. But every time you repeatedly ignore your own standards, something quietly changes inside you. You begin doubting your own word. And once you stop trusting yourself, it becomes difficult to expect others to trust you. Self-leadership begins with keeping the promises that nobody else knows you made. That is where character is formed. Character is not built in moments of recognition. It is built in moments of choice. Imagine a ship crossing a vast ocean. The captain cannot control the waves. He cannot control the wind. He cannot control the weather, but he can control the direction of the ship. Life works much the same way. You cannot control every circumstance. You cannot control the economy. You cannot control other people's opinions. You cannot control unexpected setbacks, but you can control the principles that guide your decisions. Values become your compass when circumstances become unpredictable. Without values, every challenge pushes you in a different direction. With values, even uncertainty cannot steal your sense of direction. This is especially important because fear rarely announces itself clearly. Fear often disguises itself as logic. It says, now isn't the right time. It says, wait until you're more experienced. It says, someone else can do it better. It says, you don't want to disappoint people. Those thoughts sound reasonable. That is why they are so dangerous. Fear doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it sounds like common sense. Sometimes it sounds like your own voice. That is why self-awareness matters so much. You have to learn to pause and ask yourself an important question. Is this decision coming from my values or is it coming from my fear? That single question has the power to change your entire life because values create long-term fulfillment. Fear creates short-term relief. Short-term relief feels good today. Long-term fulfillment creates a meaningful tomorrow. There will always be moments when doing the right thing costs you something. It may cost popularity. It may cost convenience. It may cost certainty. It may even cost opportunities that seem attractive in the moment. But values remind you that success without integrity is never real success. A career built on compromise eventually feels empty. A relationship built on dishonesty eventually breaks. A reputation built on pretending eventually collapses. Integrity is what allows success to become sustainable. People often confuse confidence with certainty. They think confident people never question themselves. The opposite is often true. Confident people experience doubt just like everyone else. The difference is that they don't allow doubt to become their decision maker. They allow their values to decide. That is why courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing your values even while fear is present. Every meaningful achievement requires this kind of courage. Every honest conversation, every difficult decision, every act of forgiveness, every moment of resilience. Each one asks you to choose the person you want to become over the comfort you want to protect. Leadership is also deeply connected to responsibility. When things go wrong, fear immediately looks for someone to blame. Blame protects the ego. Responsibility develops the character. Great leaders ask different questions. Not, whose fault is this? But, what can I learn? Not, why did this happen to me? But, how should I respond? Those questions shift your attention from victimhood to ownership, and ownership is where growth begins. The moment you accept responsibility for your choices, your future becomes something you can influence instead of something you simply experience. That is incredibly empowering, because while you cannot rewrite your past, you can absolutely decide what kind of person your past will produce. Every difficult experience gives you two options. You can allow it to harden your heart, or you can allow it to deepen your wisdom. You can allow criticism to silence you, or you can allow it to strengthen your conviction. You can allow failure to define your identity, or you can allow failure to refine your character. The choice is always connected to values, not circumstances. Leadership has never been about controlling people. It has always been about controlling yourself well enough that others feel inspired to trust your example. People rarely follow instructions for very long. They follow consistency. They follow integrity. They follow courage. They follow people whose actions repeatedly demonstrate what they claim to believe. And before your family believes in your leadership, before your friends recognize your growth, before your colleagues respect your influence, there is one person who must believe it first. That person is you. Every decision you make either strengthens that belief or weakens it. Every moment you choose honesty over convenience, service over ego, responsibility over excuses, and purpose over fear, you are becoming the kind of leader whose influence is not measured by authority or status, but by the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your life is aligned with the values you refuse to compromise. There is a reason so many people begin the journey of personal growth, but never reach the person they are capable of becoming. It is not because they lack intelligence. It is not because they are untalented. It is not because they were born with fewer opportunities. More often than not, they stop because they expect transformation to happen quickly. When the results don't appear fast enough, they assume they are failing. But growth has never worked that way. Nature doesn't rush. A tree doesn't become strong because it grows quickly. It becomes strong because it continues growing through changing seasons. There are seasons of sunshine that encourage rapid growth, and there are seasons of storms that force the roots to reach deeper into the ground. Both seasons are necessary. Without the storm, the roots remain shallow. Without the sunshine, growth never begins. Human potential follows the same pattern. The person you were born to become is not created in moments of comfort. That person is shaped through consistency during uncertainty. One of the greatest misconceptions about success is that it is an event. We celebrate graduation, promotions, awards, and achievements because they are visible. But those moments are simply milestones. They are not the journey itself. The journey is made up of ordinary days, the days when nobody notices your effort, the days when you question whether your work matters, the days when progress feels invisible. Those are the days that define your future. Anyone can stay committed when life is exciting. The real test comes when excitement disappears. Because excitement is temporary. Commitment is a decision. Every meaningful relationship survives because someone chooses commitment after the emotions change. Every successful organization grows because people remain committed when challenges appear. Every respected leader earns trust because they continue showing up long after the applause fades. Personal growth follows exactly the same principle. You do not become extraordinary by making one extraordinary decision. You become extraordinary by making ordinary decisions with extraordinary consistency. There is something remarkable about the human mind. It always wants immediate evidence. You start exercising and immediately wonder why your body hasn't changed. You begin reading books and wonder why your thinking hasn't completely transformed. You practice a new skill for a few weeks and begin questioning whether you have what it takes. The mind constantly asks, "Is this working?" But growth often answers with silence. Not because nothing is happening, because the most important changes happen beneath the surface before they become visible. Think about building the foundation of a skyscraper. Months can pass before anyone walking by sees meaningful progress. From the outside, it appears as though very little is happening, but underneath the ground, engineers are preparing the structure that will eventually support something enormous. Without that invisible foundation, the building would collapse under its own weight. Character develops exactly the same way. Integrity develops quietly. Patience develops quietly. Wisdom develops quietly. Resilience develops quietly. The world celebrates visible success while ignoring invisible preparation. Yet invisible preparation is what makes visible success possible. This is why comparison is so dangerous. When you compare your beginning to someone else's middle, you become discouraged. You forget that every person you admire once stood exactly where you are standing now. Every confident speaker once struggled to find their voice. Every respected leader once questioned whether anyone would follow them. Every successful entrepreneur once faced uncertainty. Every compassionate mentor once needed guidance themselves. Growth is universal. Nobody skips the process. The problem is that social media often convinces us otherwise. We see the highlights. We see the victories. We see the polished version of people's lives. Rarely do we see the years of quiet persistence that created those moments. As a result, people begin believing they are behind. But life is not a race. Purpose has never operated on someone else's timeline. Your responsibility is not to become someone else. Your responsibility is to become more fully yourself. That requires patience. Patience is not passive. Patience is active faith. It is the willingness to continue planting seeds even before you see the harvest. It is continuing to practice when mastery feels far away. It is choosing integrity when compromise appears easier. It is continuing to believe in your purpose during seasons when external validation is completely absent. Purpose gives meaning to patience. Without purpose, patience feels like waiting. With purpose, patience becomes preparation. This is why the people who create lasting impact rarely focus only on results. They focus on standards. Results are influenced by many things outside your control. Standards remain entirely within your control. You cannot always control how quickly opportunities appear. You can control how prepared you are when they do. You cannot control whether everyone appreciates your work. You can control the quality of the work you produce. You cannot control every outcome. You can always control your effort, your attitude, your integrity, and your willingness to learn. Those choices shape identity. Identity shapes destiny. One of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself every morning is not, what do I want to accomplish today? Instead ask, what kind of person do I want to be today? That question changes your priorities. It reminds you that success is not merely something you achieve. It is someone you become. You become trustworthy one honest conversation at a time. You become courageous one difficult decision at a time. You become disciplined one consistent habit at a time. You become compassionate one act of kindness at a time. Identity is never handed to you. It is earned through repetition. And because it is earned, it can continue growing for the rest of your life. There is no finish line for becoming a better human being. There is always another lesson, another opportunity to serve, another chance to learn, another invitation to lead. The most inspiring people in the world never believe they have arrived. Their humility keeps them curious. Their curiosity keeps them learning. Their learning keeps them growing. That cycle never ends. The moment you believe you have nothing left to learn is often the moment growth quietly begins to disappear. But when you approach each day with the mindset of a student instead of someone trying to prove themselves, every experience becomes valuable. Success teaches gratitude. Failure teaches resilience. Criticism teaches self-awareness, responsibility teaches maturity, service teaches purpose, and over time, those lessons become woven into your character until the person you once hoped to become is no longer a distant vision. It becomes the way you think, the way you speak, the way you respond under pressure, the way you treat people when there is nothing to gain, and the way you continue showing up long after motivation has faded. That is what lasting transformation looks like, not a dramatic moment that changes everything overnight, but a lifetime of choosing growth so consistently that excellence no longer feels like an achievement. It simply becomes who you are.